Your biggest business problems are hiding in plain sight, scattered across customer service calls, survey responses, app store reviews, and sales conversations. Jochem, CEO of TheyDo, reveals how organizations can unlock their biggest problems by using AI to connect data sources that were previously unimaginable. In this episode, you'll learn how to unlock the power of your customer data and insights, use journey maps in innovative ways, and create an intelligence layer to make product decisions. Thank you for listening to the Design of AI podcast. We provide secrets for building AI products that customers value. Remember to follow us on your favorite podcasting app. This episode was brought to you by PH1 Research, specialized in rapid research to improve product decisions about your next AI release. Validate use cases, test concepts. Email info@ph1.ca and mention the Design of AI podcast to get a 15% discount on your first project. The Design of AI podcast is hosted by Brittany Hobbs and Arpi Drag-Figueredo.
Welcome, Jochem. I am excited to speak to you about your platform, what your vision of experience design is, and how AI is changing research in a lot of ways. You've built a platform called TheyDo. I'd love to know what inspired you to go down this founder's journey. It's a very difficult path.
Yeah, thank you for having me and your kind words. So the honest answer is that we didn't want to build a product company at all. We were a strategic design firm back in the days, helping big corporations to be customer-centric again, or try to be customer-centric, period. And we used journey mapping and data analysis and user research and basically helped teams to build their capabilities from the ground up. And we kept coming back to this journey is the cornerstone of everything we do. But mapping feels so outdated. It's like hanging on the wall or in a digital whiteboard. But what are we doing? So that's when we started to build something for the agency on a WordPress backend. We called the CX tool. And our customers loved it. And they wanted to have it when we were helping them. And when we left the assignment and got to work with the next team, they said, can we keep it? Can you install it for us? Can we have it? And that's where the idea came from. So we pulled that thread, and it turned out there was not just here where we were based in Amsterdam with global corporations that have headquarters here. There was a huge demand across the globe. So we said, why don't we build a product company? Little did we know what we were getting ourselves into, but 5 years later, here we are.
So a lot of our listeners probably have never interacted with journey maps, or like you said, they're a thing that sit on a wall or in a file drive. But for product teams that are involved in journey mapping, they can often find it really an insightful research practice. But they also often find the practice cumbersome, not necessarily actionable. The joke is that journey maps are a very expensive artwork to put on the walls in your office, right? Combining AI with TheyDo, it seems like it's been a really big game changer around being able to action those insights. So can you tell us about your vision and what's possible now in that area of journey management that wasn't before?
Yeah, so this is one of the problems that we saw as well. And first and foremost, if you're doing primary research and you want to understand the sequence of events that are happening, journey mapping is a great practice and a great tool, but nothing more than that, just to understand. However, if you think about what a product actually is, and I like one of our customers, Lufthansa, has this wonderful definition. They say a product is basically a sequence of experiences. When you break that down, you think about, okay, how do we express experience? Well, then a journey is probably the most common tool we have to do that. And the next thing you ask is, from that map, how do we layer on the data? How do we bring this into something that is actually dynamic and working for us and continuously improving and used to be monitoring? That is where this is going. But to go back to the original question of the cumbersome process and the expensive artifact hanging on the wall, do you have any idea what it takes on average for a professional team, insights, researcher, depending on the role, to actually get to a high quality journey from, let's say, the research all the way to getting it in place where it's agreed upon? Any guess on average?
I mean, having done several journey maps, I can guess, but I'm assuming within these big enterprises, it probably takes 3 or 4 months to get alignment and get something built out.
Yeah, so on average, a little bit less, unfortunately. But yes, this is also not uncommon, right? So months. So we said, what if we build an AI that can take raw data and turn that into a high quality journey where personas are built out, the sequence is known, we've done the affinity mapping, we've built out the pain points, we are backing them up with real data, all the factual quotes and building that up. And we're doing that in minutes now. So that's the state of play where we are today. And most of our customers have hundreds of journeys under management. And they all need to be created from scratch or like brought into those digital hanging on the wall artifacts that are somewhere outdated or have some elements of truth. So that's the first AI solution we've built like a year ago when LLMs became good enough to do all the sequencing and the logic reasoning to get there. And then there's still human in the loop aspects of it we can talk about. But that's a huge improvement in terms of productivity, getting an understanding of what the actual experience is like and what the sequence of those experiences is like when thinking about building a product to support that workflow or the task or the goal that people have in mind.
I'm running into this problem right now. I'm actually working with a large enterprise on a journey mapping project, and they actually can't wrap their head around the fact that journeys are there to uncover what you don't know. And they're going in with a very deterministic perspective, which is, well, these are the segments. This is what we're trying to answer. This is exactly what we need to document. And this is exactly the output we need to get. But like you're detailing, the intention of this is we might think this is true, but a journey is there to actually uncover what the reality is. And the more real time you get, the better results you get.
Yes. Yeah, I was on one side of the spectrum early on in my career. I was like, no, it has to be customer centric. It has to be outside and you need to start from the customer's perspective. That's true. But you can also start from the business perspective and say, okay, fine, let's roll with this. Let's do your process inside out mapping of what is actually the customer experience. So you get that in place. And then you ask, okay, so what is the data that would back this up? And the cool thing that we stumbled upon almost is, I'll give you an example. In insurance, claims handling is always an issue, right? The volume is too high, it's costly. Let's talk about your claims handling process. And we're working with one insurance company and they said, this is our process. So we said, okay, what data do you have? And they had surveys, verbatims, research. They had all these different parts of the qualitative inputs that were lying there, that were available. So we mined that data in the context of that journey map that they thought was existing. And we saw a lot of the steps had zero insight. So that either was we have a gap of knowledge into what customers are actually doing or feeling or experiencing in that step, or it doesn't exist in the first place, which was super revealing to that team. So they understood like, okay, yeah, so what we think is not aligned with the customer thing. Let's dig in more. So that was a super useful exercise to do. And today with AI, that's very fast. I don't know how you're doing it with your client, but if you're doing it the manual way, quote unquote, using your brain to synthesize the data, aggregate it, and analyze it, it might take you a long time to get to that understanding with that team.
Yeah, we might need to talk about how I can use TheyDo for this.
Yes, going to talk about it off chain, and I'll show you around for sure.
One of my favorite projects that I worked on in the last couple of years was around insurance claims as well, where we did an inside out and an outside in journey to look at what's the difference between those experiences. And it was amazing how one of the things that we identified was just there was a massive disconnect even in the language being used. Customers were being surveyed and asked about their experience. They were actually responding with a different interpretation of that experience than the claims adjusters were. You know, your product is really around how do you shift from journey mapping to journey management as a dynamic insights platform to really open up a lot more possibilities than we could do before or when you're doing everything manually. So it opens up a lot of data-centered decisions and ability to create more complex interaction documentations. So how do you see access to journey-based data transforming product decisions?
Let me start with the simple notion of how I think about what a journey is, right? So we have journey mapping. People think it's a map. It's a depiction of reality. Then you have journey management, which is sometimes confused as the practice of managing all these journey maps in one place, right? Getting some governance and some standardization around that, which is also useful. You need that. But that's not the point of journey management. So the way I think about journeys is that a journey is basically a data model. It's just the context, like it has a boundary to what is it in that context that you are able to understand. So it goes for qualitative insight from the different feedback sources you have in the research you have, but it also goes for the structured data that you're collecting, the performance-based metrics, conversion rates, the behavioral analytics, all the different metrics that tell you what people are doing. So if you bring those together in the context, you have essentially a data model. It can tell you, like, in this context, here's what's happening before, during, and after. And here's the weight of all of this. So the biggest pain point is this. And because we're looking at, let's take claims handling again, or looking at volume, it might be that the biggest pain point that we're seeing has nothing to do with decreasing the volume. So then you can start making quicker decisions on, so this is what the customer problem is. This is what we are trying to solve for the business. Should we look at something else? No. So when product teams are thinking about, again, sequence of experiences that go into using their product, how do we influence what customers are trying to achieve? That also impacts the business. And usually one of those two sides is well represented in a product workflow. And it's typically like, or it's the business saying like, we need to solve this. You tell me what's on your roadmap, on your backlog, what you want to do. So they have good ideas. Or it's only coming from a customer insight. We have this insight, but it doesn't map onto what the business needs. And that causes a lot of disconnects. So when product teams are using journeys, they're basically using it to align across functions. Insights teams to collect the data, research teams, but also business stakeholders, data teams that are all together collaborating on figuring out this problem that we're trying to solve. So it's moving away from this notion of product centricity, which is essentially is not a bad thing, but in a lot of large organizations it is, because it's things like, I'm the product owner, I'm the chief product officer, I'm thinking about a product, and that's the only thing that matters. But there is the customer experience in which your product is playing a role in helping them achieve something.
A major theme in our recent conversations has been chaos and the loss of control. And as we move in this era of probabilistic interfaces, quite simply, product leaders aren't really going to know what the outcomes are going to be. They actually won't even know how users move through products. So I can imagine that this type of dynamic data collection model of yours could be really helpful. Have you seen examples of leveraging journey management as an effective way to document probabilistic and dynamic product experiences?
So as we're building out all these capabilities, you can imagine that when you have hundreds of thousands of rows of data and you're building out a journey and you have all these insights coming in, it can be quite overwhelming. You have pain points here and gains there. Like if you look at a traditional journey map, that's structure we're using. So for the experts, it's great because they instantly get a sense of where they are. But for the consumer, the person ultimately making a decision, a product leader or business executive that is consuming that data, they might not be familiar with what they're looking at. So they need something more simple, right? So they need more like a summary version of that data. So the problem for us is like where to invest first. What we are doing is we're analyzing our calls that we're having with our customers. We're using different feedback sources to, again, understand this part. And what is bubbling up using that for us is that the creator experience of making that journey model in the first place is the number one problem to focus on. Right? And there are some pain points around that in that early creation stage of the journey, which is logical because if you don't have the review state or the review human in the loop experience well defined, well, it doesn't scale. But for us, that helps to guide the teams on making decisions like, no, first and foremost, making sure that data quality, so not only the data in, but also the inside out, is the number one thing to fix. You can have the best review experience in the world. You can have the best interface for understanding, but it stems from that problem. And until we've solved that, which we're doing, this will not happen next. So designing those interfaces that we deem very important, and I'm a designer, right? So from a user experience, we need to do that first. It makes more sense to focus on the data quality, labeling, tagging, structuring, scoring, even though that's less visible and the output will be unconsumable. Nailing that is important. And getting all that data in that place, in that step of the experience, is very helpful for our teams to make a judgment call based on qualitative data.
Let's make an important distinction for people listening. They might think customer experience does this. Platforms like Qualtrics do this, Medallia, et cetera. But when I look at those platforms, they're almost all lagging and historic data. They're pulse surveys here or there. They're collecting data feeds from various places, but they don't seem like a cohesive snapshot, particularly in a world that is becoming more probabilistic. Can you help define the difference between what you're doing and those more typical CX platforms have been doing?
And Qualtrics is a great partner. We are coexisting in many of our customers because listening and sending out surveys, right, where they traditionally have grown, and they call it experience management, but it's basically like listening well to customers, analyzing the data that's coming through and helping business to make decisions, is a discipline in the VOC, the voice of customer space, that has been growing for the last decade or so. But what it doesn't appreciate is that in what context are people doing this? What is the business context of that specific thing? What is going on around that? How do we reconcile this with our primary research, with the App Store reviews, with the feedback that people are giving us and the sales conversations we're having, the customer success calls that we're having? So there's all these different sources that are not necessarily part of it. Now, the other part of the equation is the team structure itself. So customer experience teams in the enterprise specifically have been looking backwards. They are, in some organizations, even just keeping the score, right? Making sure that NPS is going up, whatever it takes. And they don't have a mandate to change, to deliver, to make, but they're keeping the score. So what they do is they tweak the survey so the score goes up. I'm not saying that everyone is doing this, but this definitely happens. So VOC programs are, like you said, backward looking, thinking about what have people experienced and telling us, but they're missing another part of the equation, which is, and how does it affect business performance? And in that context, what are we doing about it? And that together makes Qualtrics and Medallia wonderful platforms for collecting and listening. But what they miss is the contextualization and bringing all these other data sources together so you can have an informed insight and basically turn it into an opportunity that is actionable.
Sometimes it feels like the industry isn't ready for actually truly proactive, predictive, and personalized experiences. Are you starting to feel like that shift is happening in a positive way? Because sometimes it feels like the leaders aren't ready.
It's hard, right, to have an autonomous system do that on your behalf. So we've seen the first steps of that with journey orchestration, and there was a whole batch of platforms that tried to do that, but ultimately they failed because they were tied to marketing, and it became more like marketing automation and sending Brittany another message than RP, or sending you an email and sending Brittany a text message, right? So that is the state of play we were. And that was also because the decisioning engines behind them were limited, because the Transformer paper hadn't been written and LLMs weren't on the market. So everyone had their proprietary system or built something. So that was the first attempt, I think. But the real problem is that on an enterprise level, doing personalization requires almost like an end-to-end connected system of data, which by definition is hard to achieve given all the legacy systems. So we're now getting into using AI as the wedge into it, into an era where this is becoming possible. So people are becoming ready for this. But you have to think about it. If you're a leader at the enterprise, what are you going to trust? Some new novel AI solution is just on market? The steps for an enterprise to truly build like that agentic layer that can have an autonomy to make decisions and to personalize basically any experience is coming, but it will take time because of all the reasons I just laid out. People are willing, but cautiously optimistic on implementing and starting to do things that AI can do on their behalf.
Yeah, you mentioned before about the priority around data cleanliness and data hygiene. And I just suspect that a lot of organizations won't feel comfortable with over-relying on personalization until they also know that the data that they're using to put into that is clean enough that it can be a more predictable outcome.
Yes, when you think about it, is that now we're letting humans to be the judge of that. So hiring great talent and getting the best people in to make those judgment calls, to personalize an experience, to create something for the customer is now on humans. So you're relying on whoever you have inside your company to make those decisions. So it's a matter of when do we believe that AI is on par with the reasoning and making those decisions. And we're not that far off. So it's more a trust issue on, do we want to go and let AI make those decisions just as we let our humans make those decisions versus a possibility. But yes, it starts with data cleanliness, and that is not great at the enterprise. So that's also why all of these solutions that are now coming to market, including ours, have a big aggregation, labeling, and part of structuring to the core of it. So to make sure that all the sources you already have are coming into one place to actually feed the decisioning engine, if you will.
We've been talking about a lot of things, but a bit at a high level. So let's get into some more examples. got an insurance broker platform that has automated customer service, augmented sales, a product that retrieves context from your credit history, questionnaires, my conversations that I have with the company. How would you use TheyDo to enable the product team to make better decisions with all of that disparate data?
The first step to do is understanding the context. It actually starts with the business, right? What is that insurance company? Where are they in the market? Are they the leader? Are they seen as the top brand? Do they have a challenger node? So it totally depends on the business context, what that answer should be. But let's assume it's a tried and tested brand that has been there for decades, if not a century, right? So everyone knows it. They're doing phenomenally well. They have a market leadership position, but they want to stay ahead and keep ahead. Let's take that as an example. So then the question is, so where's the business problems? Okay, typically an insurance company wants to grow, but do it efficiently, right? So cutting costs while improving the customer experience. So where does that start? And I think that is the next question. It typically starts with your data that you already have. If you look at what are people calling the customer service for, those are typically the best places to look for the low value calls where people are having issues that you're not necessarily solving well in your actual customer experience when people are interacting with your products, with your digital services that you have. Okay, so we know that. So when there's a specific spike where there's typically like, here's the top 10 call reasons that we can't do anything about, that's the place to start digging. If, let's say, your goal is to get your costs down while improving the customer experience. So then from there, you need to start unraveling, okay, sure, people are calling because, I don't know, the premium went up for no reason and we have issues. So you start to understand where in the experiences of people in their life cycle with us does this occur? What are the journeys that they're interacting through with us? What are the experiences they're having? Is it people that have just become a customer? Is it lifelong customers that have been acquiring multiple of our products? So understanding which journeys go into that problem. And then the question is, do we have all these data sources available so we can basically suck them into that context and understand literally step by step, where are the pain points? What are the frictions that people are experiencing in that particular experience, in those journeys, step by step? And then looking at the weight of it. So maybe there's a specific pain point that sounds promising, but we only have from one specific source, from one specific customer segment, a ton of feedback. That's good. But you maybe want to look at where is a pain point where we have across segments and across the different channels feedback that is consistent with that. So typically that would grow higher into relevance. And the question is, can we do something about that if we want to say we want to lower our cost? Does this have a positive impact to lower our cost? We address it. Maybe the simple answer is people will call less if we do it. Fantastic. So how many calls do we have? Okay, few 100,000 a year. How many of those were related to this? And what is the cost associated with it? Let's say we can tackle a few $1 million of recouped service if we don't have this problem anymore. That's the briefing for a product team, for a marketing team, for a service team to look at where is the opportunity for me to do something with my roadmap, to do something with my planning to impact that. So all the way from like bigger business context to like what is a problem we want to fix in our strategic outlook for the year, what are our goals, bringing that back to where are those journeys, bringing that back to where is the problem step by step, and how do we prioritize that to create an opportunity that different teams can contribute to solving and ultimately, in this case, seeing that cost down. So that's essentially the workflow that we're underpinning with a tool like TheyDo.
I'm running into this issue again with an enterprise where I'm trying to explain to them that if we focus on how to more effectively leverage your data, you can reduce the time to action on customer issues. You can more efficiently leverage existing teams. And obviously you can boost those satisfaction scores because you can identify friction before it becomes problems. But as an organization, they're having a hard time wrapping their head around it because they imagine this is adding a bunch more bureaucracy, where in fact it's the opposite. What have you seen as an effective way to sell in this new vision?
It starts with making sure that they don't think this is a new, long, big transformation, right? I always get a bit nervous when people say, we got to break down the silos, and everyone gets nervous. Those silos exist for a reason. They got you to scale. They have accountability within them. Let's make them work better together. You have the data, but what if you can start connecting that better across to overcome some of those misalignments that you're having. What I've seen to do this is address the elephant in the room, right? I call it siloism. We have these silos, but they don't operate well. So instead of fighting that, let's bring that together. But there is real cost associated with having your silos, right? The collection cost, like everyone collects their own data in the different silos. There's the contextualization cost, which we talked about. It's like we don't have a shared context between marketing, product, and CX. Everyone has their own context and dashboards. So, and then that leads to decision costs because you need a lot of meetings, a lot of reporting, a lot of different entities and sources and dashboards and PDFs to send around to people to get agreement on, which slows down ultimately the time to market, whether it's resolving an issue quickly or building a true new value prop, including a service that you want to ship. But because all these costs exist, the question is, which one is the most important? And typically it's either something around contextualization or decision-making. So you want to press harder on that. And then you look at where is the friction between different teams making decisions. Sometimes I've even had, so not to name a brand, but big telco, they had the data to understand what was going on with churn. Telco churn is typically very high, but because they couldn't agree on the different levels of importance of the issues, there was no decision. So for 12 months, they didn't do anything to address churn. And they had all these data about what could be solved. So the indecision cost was very high. Starting to press on that, prioritizing it better, having a system to say this is more important than that is removing the fuss. And if you do it in a data-driven way, here's actually what customers are saying. There's 20,000 points of feedback that go into this pain point. Then people start to listen. But you have to find the specific point of the symptom of siloism that is hurting the most to start addressing that. And as you can hear, I'm not talking about journey mapping and customer centricity. It's like, where does it hurt in the business? And ultimately, there's a better solution to do this, which also happens to be customer-centric.
As I look into the future, I work in typically user research, and the space is shifting. And I think people are very apprehensive and concerned about what it's going to look like. I envision a future where we move from data pulling to insights pushing. We are more proactive, more flexible, rather than running one-off research studies. We're building insights practices that can contribute into a continuously evolving data model about our customers. One where qualitative insights become much more important in organizations because those insights are analyzed across hundreds of data points and matched against personas and situational context. How close do you feel like we are to allowing user research to become more data-centric and more of a leading insights activity?
I know how important it is to ask the right questions, to observe customers, meeting them in their homes, in their work, to really understand what they're doing. It's just part of the equation. So when we think about the evolving of this role, to your point, I have a word for this, CX engineering. The role of a researcher or person in the insights team is changing from doing the work to creating the system to have all the work start to have a cohesive or collective impact. It doesn't mean that we don't spend time with customers talking to them, but it's freeing up all the time to find the right customers to talk to, while all of our grunt work, which is typically done in analyzing and going through massive survey results and almost by hand looking at what is actually relevant and what isn't, all of that is going to go away. So CX engineering, like what is the system that we need to understand the inputs, turn it into insights, to push it out to the right teams at the right time, is a whole new discipline that's unfolding right in front of our eyes. And user researchers, because they understand the skills and they have the knowledge, what goes into it, are by definition the great people to actually build those systems.
What I want to ask is a bit of a follow-up on that, is we talked about siloism, but siloism kind of begins with role definitions and each have their own KPIs and their own remits and budgets and such. I'm wondering if we are going to move to a place where insights is a layer, is a platform, where it's not necessarily just we did one study, another study, another study. And I'm asking this because as products get more complex and more chaotic, it feels like user research is the only way that an organization will identify problems before they become huge issues. Are you starting to work with any AI-centered organizations where your platform is enabling them to catch things before traditional QA might?
Yeah, so that is the role still of user research. It's like generative research, talking to existing customers or people like potential customers to really understand what's going on in their role to shape future innovation. I don't think that will go away. That will be augmented with AI and with better tooling, give us more like a global platform to talk to more people and maybe even at some point have an RP avatar that is doing the research for them. So there will be augmentations of that. But if I hear you correctly, which is also aligned with what I'm seeing, is there's more like an experience intelligence layer running across the organization that's always on, but that will help you to also say, like, if this is the baseline that we're currently having and that will build over time, what is the anomalies that we're starting to see? All of a sudden, there's a feedback spike coming in because people start to complain about food qualities in a certain region of the world. What's going on? Can you do something about it? No. Does your PR team want to know exactly right when people start? Sure. When you have this layer, there's all these little things you can do with that. But to really be ahead of the curve for now, I think human judgment of interpretation of where people are going with their heads, what's going on in their lives to really fuel innovation and future value propositions, that part of the work is still very much human-like today.
The fact that a lot of insights gathering is built around very oversimplified artifacts. When we think of personas and journeys,
right,
they're trying to reduce it to such a level that anyone in enterprise can leverage them. And they lack the context, they lack the definition that actually enables someone to really see that person's life and see what the problem was. And I keep running into this again and again, where clients, they don't want the right solution. They want the solution that makes the most sense for them in their culture. And that's not customer centricity. That's the opposite. But a platform like yours and many of the other ones operating at this level can really create dynamic personas that are situationally adapting based off circumstances, which is much more accurate to represent the customer journey in many respects. And I know Brittany's running into this a lot too, but this idea of a dynamic persona and being able to have adaptive campaigns for them, I think to me is like a holy grail of product design and product strategy.
Yeah, it was oversimplified, right? Because we didn't have the access to, or the time, or the resources, or the people to analyze all those data. So what did we do? Interviewed 10, 12 people. We ran a survey. We trusted the survey analytics was correct. We married that with our interview notes, and we came to some hypothesis that is fueling something new. So now we have 1 million data points, and it's dynamic, and it's doing it automatically for us. So we can run this across all these different problems or questions that we're having. That is a superpower that organizations are now getting.
In my experience, it seems like one of the problematic things about journey maps and personas and whatnot is it's also an artifact that we're trying to make work for an organization to use for the next 2, 3, 5 years, right? And so you also can only put so much information because you need it to be something that can hold true for a while. So if we look specifically at the question of, rather than using these as artifacts, but instead, how do we improve the decision-making for product teams in this era of AI-powered products? What insights should organizations be seeking in an effort to deliver more personalized, more predictive experiences?
Journeys that have to last 2 years, and then all the research that's going into it, and let's take a whole year to really define that persona, and that's sticking till the end of time. That was a solution for the problem journeys created in the first place, that they were static, high, costly to produce, and therefore they had to stick for a long time. Now, I do believe that in the case of the insurance company, again, like filing a claim, that is an experience that you all go through. Today, you have like a variety of channels to get that claim reimbursed. 10 years ago, there were 2. In 2 years, maybe you can just use your favorite LLM to fix it for you. So the journey is still there. The experience of like, did I get what I needed? Did I achieve that claim to be handled correctly and promptly, and ultimately giving me that money back? The structure of that journey will not change, but how people are doing that, which product they're using to achieve that, is continuously changing. So I like to think about journeys as something that is sticking through the end of time. Of course, that will change and there will be new journeys and there will be different journeys. But a generic journey like this, that will stay relevant. But how you solve for the pain points of today is different than how you will solve for the pain points of, let's say, a year from now. Because based on the new things you're building, people will have a different experience. People will have a different interaction with your brand, and they will be satisfied. Okay, great. Don't need to look into it. Or you created a new problem that you weren't aware of that we now need to address. I'm filing that claim anyway. And if I'm dissatisfied, I'll leave. But if you're really good, you know why I'm dissatisfied. You'll solve my problem well, and you'll give me a tool that is better the next time, so I'll stay. So that interplay is always useful. And therefore, because the journey is so ubiquitous and something that we can all relate to, it's a story of like what happens before, during, and after. It's just a better way to align because your products come and go. Your teams will come and go. But that customer experience, achieving that claims handling efficiently for me, that will stay as long as I need insurance.
To follow up on Brittany's question, I think right now we're at a place where you as a product company can learn more by just listening to what people are saying rather than looking for specific data points. And if we're dealing with churn, if we're dealing with why people have a low NPS, that's much more valuable than say, oh, here's my 4-question survey, right? Have you been able to implement this new form of thinking where qualitative is actually at the top of the data pyramid effectively? And if so, what did you have to do to make that happen?
So this is what we're working on. And I think the business in the last decade or so, or an enterprise business, have created this over-reliance on KPIs, on structured metrics that are easy to capture, easy to structure, easy to analyze, relatively easy to analyze. And because of that over-reliance, like it's common to have a metric like, oh, the claims volume, that's based on hundreds of thousands of interactions that we're capturing week on week, month on month. It's reliable, it's trustworthy. And then we come in with the qualitative and say like, oh, we talked to 5 people and they feel like this. Like, So that disconnect, that gap has been huge. So what we're now seeing is because all of the qualitative insights, the verbatims, the quotes, the things that people are giving us as feedback is now being able to put back on par with that. We can also quantify that and say, hey, look, over this period of time, you had like 50,000 people that all said something that related to this specific pain point in this specific experience. Well, now we're talking a language that people can understand. So quantifying the unstructured, the qualitative aspects of it are tremendously helpful to balance, right? To marry the numbers and the emotions, as we say, in that journey context. And that's what we're building towards. And we're building more analytics capabilities out of the box so that you can start to draw correlations between these two and say, hey, we are launching this thing. So our volume is going down, our complaints are going up. And then you can draw interesting conclusions, right? Or create new opportunities. Because that's the other point that I've seen very useful is like, to your point on the language, the insight can be, all these people are saying this thing about a particular experience, but that's just the insight. The opportunity is, hey, we need to look at the language. Like, how might we change our language to be more customer-centric so we can actually get them connected to our brand better so they stay long? So the interpretation of the opportunity from the pain point is the other place where we think organizations can turn this into quantified information, and they rank and score all of these opportunities using a same method to basically take the fuss out of it and prioritize it effectively.
Is there anything else in your roadmap you're happy to share?
So the data-driven aspect of quantifying all of this is one thing that is exciting. I think by the time this airs, we've launched our data hub, which is helping people to pull in from all these different sources to one place, making it way easier. You used to have the journey as the data hub. Now we have a workspace as the data hub where all these journeys are feeding off from. So we're investing heavily in making it simpler, easier, and almost like invisible to handle that massive scale of data. So that's what's coming.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, I actually found a webinar video of your platform, and it was a wonderful walkthrough to see the capabilities. And it's really impressive because I can imagine product managers using it. I can imagine salespeople using it. I can imagine founders using it. And that breaks the silos in ways that's powerful. And again, I know you don't like that expression, but it is important.
Uniting silos, connecting the dots.
That's right. That's right. Connecting silos. That's the right expression. What are some other AI platforms that you're excited about and might want to share with the listeners?
I love N8N right now. So what we're doing is we're building all these custom workflows internally, stitching together different tools, using prompts to basically action it. And funny enough, my team is building a vendor bot right now. So I can actually have conversations with myself in my tone of voice, analyzing, let's say I have a podcast, right? So analyzing the conversations with the guests I have to get to what were the main takeaways that are interesting. How should we think about that, bringing that perspective to the world and basically helping me guide the meaningful data points from that. And it's all happening in Slack through N8N. So that's a definitely great platform. On the data platform side, we switched to Omni recently for our structured metric analytics internally. It's very easy for us to use. So I'm a big fan of those simple but super powerful platforms. So big shout out to them. And what I'm most impressed by is Supabase, which is becoming now the database layer for all these like lovables and bolts of helping non-technical people build applications and then attaching their solution to those platforms. It's just one of those growth hacks where you think like, that's so cool that they were able to do it. And with one click are now becoming like the database for any app that people are front or vibe coding with these platforms for.
Thank you for your time, Jochem. It's been a wonderful chat. I really encourage anyone to look on your YouTube channel. You had a ton of information there. And obviously, TheyDo can be found everything. And your podcast as well is absolutely wonderful to dive into the world of CX and experience management, journey management. And there's a ton of insights, particularly for product people there. Thank you again for your time.
This was awesome. Thank you so much, RP. It was a wonderful conversation.